Good morning, everybody. It's Peter O'Callaghan from RISCO Group Australia. I hope everybody's well. Thank you for attending today's webinar. I'd just like to wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started, just to allow for additional attendees to log in, and we should be getting started anytime soon. So what I'd like to do is, those of you who've got any questions, you can either put up your hand. There's a little icon there that allows you to raise your hand. I can take your questions, or you could actually ask or type a question in the questions tab, and every 20-30 minutes I could pause to answer some of those questions, and depending upon the priority of the question, I might answer it at the time, depending upon how critical it is to the subject. Yeah, we'll be able to do it in an orderly fashion. If you want to wait until the end, I will be taking most of the questions towards the end. Yeah, please feel free to ask any questions if you have any. Okay, so I'd just like to welcome everybody to our RISCO Cloud version 5 webinar. And as you may have been aware, we've sent out notifications to installers regarding the change, which will be happening on the 2nd of October. So this is so that installers are not taken by surprise when they discover that the installer admin has changed all of a sudden to the new version. So this is to prepare you for when we go live with the new version of RISCO Cloud. Okay, so let's get started. All right, today we'll be covering the overview on the cloud, and we'll have a look at some of the major changes in the cloud, particularly with the installer admin, and changes around registering as an installer, first time sign up. Also changes around managing sites and managing your company. We will also discuss adding panels, cameras, and smart homes. Currently, we still haven't released the smart home gateway to the Australian market yet, but hopefully it will be soon when we manage to get stock of the new version 2 when it's released. Configuration software in RISCO Cloud we'll also cover in detail, which is probably one of the most important aspects of this training. It's a critical component for you guys, especially when you're wanting to connect to your panels remotely via the cloud. I must say this, that without installer admin, you will not be able to log into your panel via the configuration software via the cloud. So this is really important for you to be across. Otherwise, you will not be able to remotely connect to your panel without installer admin. Okay, so we'll also talk about how things will change for the end user to a certain extent, especially with the smartphone app. So let's move on and get started. Okay, Main changes within the RISCO Cloud version 5 will be in terms of the way that it looks. Some of you may have already seen some images, but we also update the way in which the cloud looks at a panel or a site. Before, with the current cloud, the cloud as site is actually panel centric, so it's focused primarily on the panel ID, whereas the changes now focus upon the site being the main key or registry within the cloud. And there's a number of reasons why we've done this. Also, the company is now going to be your installer admin. So installer admin has been renamed as a company. Also, we're looking at owner and installer entities. The new installer admin or the company will also include the ability to add tags to sites and also to add locations. In other words, you have some new features that allow you to track addresses and for a number of reasons, which will be evident as we look at some of the new screenshots. Also, we'll update in terms of roles and permissions within your company. Okay, so the new look, you would have recognized that the current cloud or the current installer admin looks very plain and simple, and but it's really getting a little bit outdated, I think, and it's sort of been waiting for a bit of an upgrade. So this is what the new installer cloud will look like, where it's got a very a new refresh to the look and feel, and you will notice that there's a lot more information being displayed within the screens. So we'll be covering this in more detail during the presentation, but as you can see, big improvement on what it was looking like before. Okay. All right, so the first thing we need to discuss is what is a site. Okay, so a site is a virtual unique entity for managing a panel, IP cameras, and a smart home system. Okay, so why is this important? Okay, so this is important because when you registered a customer to a panel, and at any time that you needed to edit or change that panel, say for example you needed to replace that panel, you basically had to more or less delete that customer's registration from the cloud before reassigning a new panel. And in doing that, you also lost the camera registrations as well. So particularly it was critical when you had a customer moving to a home that was previously owned by a RISCO user, and you wanted to update the panel with a new owner. And so typically you had to, for privacy reasons, had to delete the panel registration from the cloud for the new owner. What if you had cameras attached to that site? What happened? You know, you basically had to delete the camera registration and re-enroll the cameras. So this is the reason why we made some of these critical changes with regards to sites. So now a site is the central virtual entity of the cloud, which means that you no longer have to delete the customer registration from the cloud. You can simply remove the panel, add another panel, replace the panel, and not have to lose the customer's registration. Similarly, if you had cameras assigned to that site, you also do not need to remove the camera registration. So this is a much smarter way of managing systems within the RISCO cloud. Okay, so the installer can create a site from scratch. So you can be logged in as an installer and you assign a new site, create a new site, but you must have a physical address and owner details. So what this means is that you can actually pre-create or pre-assign a site to an owner, register that owner to that site, which means they can log in with the app. And even if there's no panel assigned to that site, you can pre-commission a site even before the panels has been installed. So there's some clear advantages with the way in which we can do things. Okay, so an end user can also create a site. However, he needs to provide a panel ID or IP cameras or a smart home gateway already connected to the cloud. So we haven't gotten rid of the self-registration capability. So if you're used to, as an installer, doing a panel registration using the self-registration method through the app, then you can still do that. And then afterwards, when you go back to the office, you can bring in the panel into your control panel group or into your company. Okay, so you can still use the self-registration method, but the panel ISDs or the panels and the cameras do need to be connected to the cloud at the time. Okay, so the other big advantage with this new feature is this: if you have a camera that's assigned to the site, you can self-register the camera as well. Okay. A site can be assigned to an installer admin or an installer, and more than one can be assigned. So there is some expanded capabilities within the company where you've got a number of installers. You can now allocate specific sites to specific installers. So you may have, maybe 10 up to 10 installers going out managing sites. Now you can allocate specific sites just to specific installers, and that's to maintain a level of maybe accountability. Maybe you want to restrict specific sites to an installer because of their seniority or because of their level of restricted to a level of security. Who knows? But it's capable, allows you to do that. And another important note with regards to installers, for an installer to be able to log into that panel with the configuration software, he needs to have a login on the installer cloud. Okay, so now this is where we're locking down the security in terms of the configuration software. All right, so let's talk about the company entity. So every created installer admin also creates a default company. So with this, you can be a collection of one installer admin and a number of installers. The company can only have one installer admin or owner of that company per se, but they can have several installers. All right, an owner is the holder of the site, and typically when you create a site, you need to allocate a register an owner for that site. And the owner is also the grand master of the system. Okay, so each site must have an owner. You can't have a site without an owner. And the owner's details will include their email address, their name, and their phone number. Okay, so when we're talking about installers, installer manages sites assigned to him or created by him, and installer can belong to only one company. All right, so if you're a subcontractor and you're working for a company that's managing RISCO panels, and maybe you're doing work for another company that's managing RISCO panels, then you're going to have to use a different email address to be able to log in to that company's installer admin or installer cloud. Installer details include email, name, phone number, address. Okay. So let's just have a look at an overview of the main entities from a symbolic point of view. So as a company, you have the owner of the company or installer admin with a number of installers underneath. And we have the sites that have been assigned or created by that company, and each have their own owner. All right. So the reason why we're covering this in this way is to bring some understanding as to how these changes reflect in the cloud and why we've made these changes. So one of the critical aspects of this has been around user logins. And as you know, the most frustrating part about our cloud at the moment is the fact that each new site requires a unique login ID. Okay, so you can only use that login ID once. Okay, so it means that every site has to have its own unique login ID. And if you're using an email address, then unfortunately the owner is restricted to using just that one email address for one site only. And that means he has to have another email address if he's got multiple sites. So this has been a bit of a problem, and we understand this. This is where the new changes and now allow us to have the one login for multiple sites. So, so when these changes occur, there will be some procedures that have been built into the cloud that allows the owner of each site to update the site details with their new login details. So the changes in the site structure allow us to have the same login ID for multiple sites. Okay, so let's have a look at the site name. Now the site name can be anything. Okay, so you don't need to make the site name unique. The site name could be the same as another site name. It doesn't really matter. However, the address may be different. Okay, so the address does need to be accurate because it does reflect the location of the site. And you'll understand that when you see some of the other features, it will be important for you to be able to track the address specifically. Also, the master owner entity in the site is currently locked to the master being the owner. All right, so one of the biggest changes in terms, and it's not so apparent, but we have it so that the site is the main focus within the database of the cloud. And so whatever happens here underneath with regards to the panel, being the panel ID, whether it be a monitoring station or an IP camera, if we change any of these things underneath, it's not going to impact on the actual site registration or even the owner registration for that matter. So it allows us to be more flexible in the way that we manage devices within the site. Okay. All right, moving on to the new installer admin or the new installer cloud. One of the other changes that we've made with regards to installer admins is that now you can register as an installer without having a panel connected to the cloud. However, you do need to put in more information, which is mandatory. Okay, so if you want to receive notifications from RISCO with regards to any updates on the cloud or any issues with the cloud, I suggest that you click on send me updates, because otherwise without that we won't be able to send you notifications regarding important updates, particularly with maintenance and so on. So I think that's an important note to make. So you do need to fill out all this information. Now, when you log on to the new cloud, when it rolls over on the 2nd, you will be required to update this information also when you log in for the first time. So these are all mandatory fields, as I mentioned before, and you'll notice that there is a new field there to do with the country. We have that there so that RISCO admin staff can manage installers at a country level. That's more localized. Allows me to help you guys more in terms of managing issues. Okay, so the biggest change here is in terms of the password management. So when you update your details, you will be requested to update your password. Okay, so I know everybody's now groaning, but we need to have at least a minimum of 8 characters now, where before it was 6. We need at least 1 capital letter and at least 1 lowercase letter and at least 1 number and at least 1 special symbol. Okay, so if you do not follow the correct criteria, your password will not be accepted. You'll need to create a password with that includes all of those characteristics. Okay, with at least 8 characters. So the security has been beefed up in the new installer cloud or in the new RISCO cloud, because end users will also be similarly affected. Okay, so they will be asked to update their password, and it will need to be including all of these requirements. All right, so if you start getting customers ringing up saying, oh, you know, I have to update my password, what's this all about? Then you can explain to them that some of the requirements have changed to increase the level of security. Okay, if a user, when an installer is trying to maybe register and the email already exists, there will be an error coming up saying this email is already registered. So there is a mechanism within the system that if the email already exists, the user will not be able to re-register. They simply, if the end user has forgotten their password, for example, then they need to go through the password reset mechanism. Okay, so instead of trying to re-register. Of course, so this is the forgot password mechanism. You click on the link and you put in your email, and you'll be emailed a link where you can reset your password. All right, so if you have an existing installer admin account, when the new cloud hits and you go to log in, it will also request for you to update your company details. and all the fields are mandatory. Okay, so you'll notice there the country, city, address, zip code. So not only are your user login details, your user details required to be updated, but your company details for the installer admin will be required to be updated as well. That is if you're an installer. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? I'd just like to give the opportunity for anyone. Looks like I do see a question here. Can there be multiple panels per site? Okay, so we'll actually go into that right now for that person who's asked that question. Let's move on to managing sites. Okay, so this is the after you've updated company details, you'll then be able to click on your sites. So if you're going to install, if you've got an existing installer admin, you will see all your sites listed there, and the site name will by default be the panel serial number. Okay, so however, you can edit that. You can change it to reflect more accurate description for each site if you wish, and so forth. So this is the main sites page, and so it's very similar to the control panel list, the control panel list in the current installer admin. And it doesn't show as much information at first view. However, you can show more information depending upon what you click on. And so there's a lot more here than what's apparent. Okay, so for example, when you select a specific site, you then have an actions button that appears, and you can perform a set of actions on that specific site. For example, you can assign a technician or employee to that site. You can send a message to that site. You can also set tags, block the cloud services. So for example, if you've got a customer that's failed to pay their bill, you can disable the smartphone app and the web app, preventing them from logging in until they pay, and then you re-enable the services. You also have the ability to transfer the site to a new owner and also delete the site from the cloud altogether. All right, so so that's just a blown up view of those actions. Okay, so we're just covering now some more details around the search, sort, filter capabilities in the site list. So we've made it a little bit easier to find specific sites. If you type in the search field a name, a city, the owner of the system, or an installer, you can list all your sites according to specific information you type there. You can also modify the search criteria as well. You will get an opportunity to log in if you've got a current installer admin. You can log into the beta version of the RISCO cloud, so you can have a bit of a play before the cloud goes live. But have a look through some of the different ways you can search for your sites within the site list. We also have added sort capabilities and filter. So we can actually order sites as in according to address, or we can according to technician, and we can also filter according to specific tags. And as you can see here, we've got 2 tags in here: high-end customer or no panel. That's been added in specifically so that we can bring up just those sites. All right, so the site details. So if I click on the details tab, it gives us a little bit more detailed information about that site. If I also click on the versions button, it shows us the devices and the version of those devices per site. Now, I have a question that's come in. Will this work on a iPad or a mobile device? Yes. Being a web application, you will be able to use any browser to log into the installer cloud, and you should be able to use this on your iPad or even your mobile phone. It's something that I actually do quite a lot myself, especially from a support point of view. If I'm out and about, I actually currently use my mobile phone to log into Installer App, and you can still do the same with the new version. Okay, just to answer your question there. Thank you. All right, so more or less moving on, when we've got the site show hide map. Okay, so we've added a new feature within the cloud, the new installer cloud, and that is the map capability. All right, so if I've selected a number of sites, as you can see here, when I click on show map, it will actually reveal the location of those specific sites. If I've updated those sites with an actual address. Now, mind you, it will be one of those things that end users will update themselves, but you also have the ability to update the addresses within the installer cloud. It's in your own interest to maintain this database for your own selves, because every time you create a new site, for example, the reason why we've done this is to allow you to manage your installs much easier. So what you do is you can create a site from scratch, and the panel doesn't even have to be installed. You can have a run list set for your installer. You've assigned those specific sites to the installer, and you've got a run list for him for the week. And so you may print out this with the map showing the different site addresses, and it allows you and your staff to manage the installation from this interface. All right, so I think it just allows you to manage those installations much easier, and it will become more apparent as we move forward through the presentation how some of these features will add to managing your installations. So to add a new site, we simply click on the new Add New Site button, and we can fill out the details accordingly with the address, the site name. The site name, like I said, can be anything. The owner details, simply a matter of typing in the customer's email address, and you have the ability to check to see if they're an existing user on the cloud. Okay, so this is how we're able to verify users and also have the same user login for multiple sites. So if they're an existing user on the cloud, we simply click on the check button, and then it will pop up the customer's name and phone number. And when we click on add, the end user will be sent an email inviting them to become the owner of the new site. Okay, so once they accept the invitation, this pending notice will be updated and show that they've accepted the invitation. Okay, so that's what that means is the end user can now log in and play with the app and sort of become familiar with the app even before a panel has actually been installed. Okay. Okay, some of the main properties with the site properties. You'll notice some of the addition. Some of these things look very similar to the current cloud, but you have at a glance all the different devices that are connected, and you'll also note the additional. We've got here the ability to add separate files. So you might have a commissioning form that's been scanned, or you may have some other documents here that you can add to your database. You can also add specific notes to each site. You can also enable and disable the cloud capability or cloud services from this page as well. And you can also add specific tags at this page as well. Okay. The site name can be anything, as I mentioned before, and this site has been assigned to a specific installer, or RAFI1, and you can change that so that you may want to have this site assigned to a different installer. Now, this is really important, I think, in terms of managing your staff and your installers. As we all know, we have staff come and go. You want to be able to manage your installers and transfer responsibilities of those sites to your new staff or to other staff or other installers. Okay, so this is just pinpointing some of the new details in the site properties and so on, which we've covered. All right, so when you've finished adding the site, this is the invitation that's sent to the owner of the system that you've put in or registered, and they'll click on the link, and when they go to the website, they will be asked to accept or reject the invitation. Okay. Once they've accepted, they get this little dialog box here. If they reject it, they will be asked to go back to the login screen. Okay, so in the event that the owner rejects the invitation, this is the updated site details, and you'll notice that the person who had that email had just rejected the invitation to that site for whatever reason. So then you will need to send a new invitation to the correct owner. All right, so let me just check to see if there's any other questions. Can you have multiple installers per site? Yes, you can. Yes, you can have all your installers managing all of your sites if you wish. That's not a problem. Okay, so let's look at the company screen. Before we only looked at the company details page, but you have all these other tabs here that allow you to perform other functions. Currently, we have two predefined roles within the company. We have an installer admin, which is the owner of the company, and an installer. And you can define additional roles and limit what each of those roles can what tasks they can perform within those predefined roles. The employees tab is where you assign new installers to your company. And similarly, when we add a new employee, we click on the button and we put in the email address of that employee. Now, this is really important to understand, because it doesn't matter if the employee, they might already have a login on the cloud. It could be for their own panel at home, or it could be a test panel. You can put in the same email address. The system will check that email address if it already exists in the system. And similarly, they will be sent an invitation to become an installer to your company. Okay, so what this has allowed us to do is use the same login details for installers and sites and so on. So there is some. We've removed a lot of the restrictions that are currently in place with regards to email addresses and IDs. So this is a really important change that's allowed us to be more flexible in the way in which we manage users. Okay, so I've sent an invitation to my new installer, and we can see the status of that invitation. And so when I get the invitation, I've been invited to become an employee under the Rafi company, and then I can click on the link to accept or decline the invite. So I'm just basically requested to log in, and once I've logged in, I've basically accepted the invitation, and I am then able to log into the installer cloud as an installer. Okay. However, I haven't been assigned to any sites yet. That would be up to my boss to make sure that I can look at sites and manage them. The other page that we have added into the company page is the products list. Now, beforehand, when we did the earlier training, maybe a month or two months ago, the products list back then was just restricted to products that you'd added into this page manually. Now, however, it's now expanded to be all products that are under the company responsibility. So if you add a panel into the sites list, it automatically is updated into your products list here. So as soon as you register a panel or a camera or a home automation gateway, that product ID is automatically added into your company products page. And however, you can pre-assign products into this page if you want to manage inventory, and it allows you to basically lock those products to your company and prevents an installer maybe a rogue installer, or maybe a subby who's not so honest. Maybe decided to try and take some of these products and use them for himself. If you've pre-added these products to your company, then he won't be able to register those devices to any other company. Okay, so it will prevent subbies and that from stealing the equipment, trying to use it elsewhere. Okay, we also have the branding. Now, I'm not sure many of you are currently using branding or not, but branding is only available to companies that are purchasing over 15K of RISCO equipment a year. If you're interested in branding, then you should speak to your distributor. They will send us an email stating that, yep, this customer has been a really good customer. Yes, you can unlock the branding for them. Then we will enable it. So for those of you who have already got the branding, then this is what it will look like, where you can change the preset colors and also add your company logos and so on. Okay, so the branding, I should just mention, is used in conjunction with the Free Control app. So with the Free Control app, it allows the customer, when they log in, to see your company branding. So that's the reason why we have that there. So that will still be maintained within the new RISCO Cloud. So we're going to move on now to how do we add a panel to a site. Okay. So after we've created the site, and look, we don't necessarily have to create the site. If you're used to registering a panel using the self-registration method, that will still exist, and we'll cover that process in a second. But after you've added a new site using the installer admin or using the new installer cloud, you want to now assign a panel. So your technicians now go on to site, or maybe you want to pre-assign a panel to a site. And this is the one of the other changes that we've introduced to the cloud. We can now add a panel to a site without actually being connected. So when we click on the Add Panel button, we are required to put in the panel serial number. Okay, so as an installer, we actually don't need to put in the full panel ID. We can simply put in the serial number, but we also need to put in the 6 capital A's, which is the CP password. All right, so you do need to put that information in manually. If you don't, the panel will not communicate. All right, so I must stress this. Not only are you required to put in the panel ID, but you are also supposed to add the panel password, right, which is 6 capital A's by default. Now, if you decide to change that, you can change it to be something completely different, but you need to make sure that you put the same CP password in this field as well. Okay, so it needs to match what's out in the field. The default is 6 capital A's. So when you're adding this panel, you simply put in the 6 capital A's and away you go. You have the option to put in the SIM card number if your panel's a 3G panel, and you can keep that just for recording those details. And then you click on Save. And the panel is added to that site. Now, we see here that the panel's status is offline, so it's allowed us to predefine or pre-commission that site with a panel. And you may prefer to do it that way. And so when the technician or the installer takes the panel to site, all he needs to do is power up the panel, and the panel is connected and is online. And then when the customer logs in, and he's obviously the customer's been using the app for about a week or two in preparation for the installation, he logs in and all of a sudden he sees the panels online. And it just makes the installation process that much easier. Okay, so or if you prefer your installers to have a little bit more autonomy, you give them the access to the installer cloud and they can add this information in themselves. Okay, all right, so we've got some more information there that we've just covered. All right, so similarly, when you're wanting to add a new gateway, you click on the little No Devices tab here, or link, and you click on Add Gateway. And the gateway, again, is similar. You're adding in the MAC address of the actual gateway. However, the difference with the gateway, it does actually need to be connected to the cloud before you can add it. All right. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the home automation gateway at this point. We will be hosting another webinar when we get closer to us releasing the home automation and how the home automation devices work. So we're not going to cover home automation in any great detail at this point. Okay, but we do use and sell the viewpoint cameras. So I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but the P2P cameras that we sell through the distribution are the viewpoint, and they're very easy to install. You simply connect the camera to the network, customer's network, and you power it up. And then to register the camera, you simply click on Add New Camera, and you make sure that you've selected RISCO P2P, and you put in the camera MAC address, and of course a name, a label for the camera. And once you've added the MAC address, the camera may actually be assigned to a different customer. This is what I was talking about before. If the camera's been registered to another customer, you will not be able to register it to another site. Similarly, if it's owned by another company, you will not be able to register it to your company. Okay. And you can see here that once I've added my camera to the system, I'll have them listed here, and I can manage them from this IP cameras page. I can then go into the triggers menu on the left here, and add the triggers for each of those cameras, and define how many snapshots I want for each camera, and if I want the 30-second video clip or not. Okay, so that's where that's done. All right, let's just see if we've got any other questions. Now the ONVIF licensing, yes, you can purchase. Can we buy ONVIF license for third-party cameras? Yes, you can, but there is a specific way that it's done. You'll need to speak to your distributor about ONVIF licensing. I didn't actually show it in the previous screen, but when you purchase a license for ONVIF, it unlocks the ability to add an ONVIF camera to the RISCO cloud. I do need to stress that if you want to register an ONVIF camera to the cloud, it is at your own risk, simply because the procedure in adding that camera is much more involved. You do need to be a an expert at CCTV. You know how to open ports. You know how to ensure that the ports are opened within the camera itself for ONVIF, and you need to have a static IP address or some kind of dynamic DNS service registered with the camera for it to work with the cloud. The cloud does need and require the site the external IP address of the site. If it's a dynamic address, then you will have some issues. So I just make that warning or disclaimer about ONVIF. If again, it's not for the faint-hearted, because ONVIF is a beast in its own right, and we can only support the cloud end of the ONVIF in terms of licensing and so on, but that's it. If you've got any weird and wonderful brands out there that supposedly support ONVIF, we can't guarantee it's going to work. Okay, so that's just one thing I'd just like to mention. But look, if you're wanting to keep things simple, you want a free and stress-free installation, I suggest that you stick with the RISCO viewpoint cameras, because they're being P2P, plug them in, switch them on, register the MAC address, and you're done. Nice and simple, and that's the way I like it. All right, so let's see, have we got any other questions here? Is it possible to obtain IP address in lieu of MAC address to link other automation hubs? Okay, so I'd just like to mention, with regards to the home automation, you can only add one home automation gateway to the customer's site, and it will only be the RISCO home automation gateway that you can use. All right, so this has not been opened up for any other type of home automation gateway. I'd just like to clarify that. It's primarily for the RISCO home automation gateway that will be released in Australia towards the end of this year. All right, I hope that answers that question. Let's see, will there be a RISCO NVR option in the future? Yes, that's actually a feature that we'll be introducing to the market, that we're currently in development. So keep an eye open for that. It's not anytime soon, but it was planned to be released somewhat the middle of next year. So yes, there will be a RISCO NVR option. So I hope that answers your question. Can you add viewpoint cameras to a third-party NVR? Yes, you can add viewpoint cameras to a third-party NVR. You simply log into the camera, create an ONVIF user or an additional user within the camera, and you register the camera in your NVR as an ONVIF camera using the new login details that you've added to that camera. That's it. It's as simple as it gets. Okay, so I hope that that answers your question. Let's have a look. Is this update going to happen on the Permacom cloud as well? No, this update is primarily for the public RISCO cloud. Any private clouds will not be updated to RISCO cloud version 5. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Is it actually a DAWA camera? Can you add a DAWA recorder? No, you can't add a DAWA recorder to the RISCO cloud. The DAWA cameras are our cameras. The viewpoint cameras are an OEM DAWA camera that have been specifically designed with our firmware. We've added some additional security features within the firmware of the camera that locks the camera out. So once you power up the camera and register it to the cloud, the camera locks itself out after 10 minutes and cannot be accessed by any normal means. So when you try to browse to the camera, you'll have page unavailable come up on the screen. The only way you'll be able to access the configuration menu of the camera is by unlocking the camera within the cloud. So you log in as an installer, you select the camera, and you basically unlock it for 10 minutes, and that will allow you to log into the camera web GUI and configure or reconfigure any of the camera settings. Okay, so all right, so your question about will it bring over old site names? Okay, so I'm not sure about that question, but I don't think we actually had a site names per se. If you had other site information like addresses and so on, yes, we will be migrating all of your existing panel information across to the site, but you will find that the site name will be reflected as the panel ID by default. Okay, so I hope that answers the question there. All right, good. We've gone through all our questions. Next page, let's talk about managing tags. Tags are a new and important way of managing your sites. So it also allows us to use the tags for filtering and sorting and searching. They're created on a company level and can be used by any installer with permission. Tags can be assigned to sites to help find them easily. For example, you might have a distributor name per site. You might have a specific monitoring station name for those sites. You may organize your sites in terms of paid, not paid, pending. You can add any tag that you wish. So if you want to create a new tag, you simply go to the company page where you see your company details, and you simply click on the add new tag field, and you type in the details of your new tag. Okay, so once I hit enter, that tag is then added to my tags list, and then I can assign any of those tags to any specific site. So the other method of assigning a tag is I could simply go to the specific site and then select the tags from the list to assign that tag. Or if I am on the site already and I think, oh, actually I want to create a new tag, I can do that as well. All right, so the other method of assigning a tag to a site is I can do it from the sites list. So I may have a number of sites that I've got opened up. If I select those specific sites in the Actions tab, I can click on Set Tags and then simply assign the specific tags that I've already created to those sites. All right, and that's how it's done. And so when I go to click on the filter, I can now filter my site list according to those tags. And then I'm done. Okay. All right, so nice new feature there for you to use that you can manage your company site lists in any way that you see fit. All right, so you can customize any tags that you want to make it easier for your business to manage those sites. Okay, so current roles and permissions. The installer admin can perform all tasks related to his company and sites but there's only one installer admin per company. Installers can perform all tasks related to his sites that's basically been assigned to him or that he adds. Okay, so getting to the most important part about the cloud, and that is in terms of configuration software. When we're connecting to the configuration software, we've actually increased the security level of a panel. We call it CS tunneling over the cloud. Now you are obliged to use the authentication feature, otherwise you simply won't be able to connect to that panel. Make sure that your panel is under your installer admin user. So if you're an installer and I want to connect to that panel with the config software, I have to put in my login details in the config software to be able to connect to that panel. All right, so what I also suggest that those of you using configuration software, please update your software. Okay, so some of you may still be using some of the older versions of configuration software. You won't see this advanced authentication menu in the connection settings page. And I'll show you the next page, but the URL at the moment, it's beta5.riscocloud.com. If you want to test this for yourself, and you're actually logging into the Beta 5 cloud at the moment, please have a bit of a play using the configuration software. If your installer hasn't been given management level for that site, he won't be able to log into that site. So this is where we've locked down the authentication for configuration software. You may only want specific installers to have access to those sites via CS, or specific sites for that matter. So, it just prevents installers from logging into sites that they're not supposed to. And so they have to use their login details when they try to connect to that panel. Okay, so as well as the URL that you have to add, you also need to put in this username and password. All right, so this is the additional authentication. So when you click on use advanced authentication, it opens up these new fields which you need to populate. Now, when the cloud goes live, it won't have Beta 5. Okay, so you remove the Beta 5, it'll just be riscocloud.com along with the string after it. And then you simply put in your cloud login, your installer admin login details. And once you've added that information, click on save, and then you'll be able to connect to that panel via the cloud. All right, now, most of you should be already using the authentication that is currently being used in the cloud or in the panels for locking out CS. All right, and that's done within the CS, the configuration software security menu for each panel. So you can lock down the security for each panel to prevent other CS users from connecting to your panel remotely. But now this feature is increased that level of security tenfold, because if I'm not an authorized installer on your installer admin, I will never be able to connect to that panel. Okay. All right. So this is a really important feature that's increased the level of security in terms of panels registered on the cloud. Okay. So if you don't have if that panel belongs to another company, you will not be able to remotely connect into it. All right. I don't have any questions there. That's good. Let's move on. So this is just an expanded view of that CS authentication. When I click on the advanced authentication, I do have to put in my login details there. Okay. All right, so I have got a question that's just come up. How can a new company take over a site? Well, unless the previous company has given permission, there is actually a feature within the installer cloud that allows you to release that site. And once that site's released, then the new company can take over administration of that site. Okay, so there is a facility within the installer cloud allows you to release that site from your company. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. All right, I've got one other question. What if the old company has shut shop? Well, then that would need to be dealt on a case-by-case basis. Generally, when companies shut shop, they usually have another company that's either bought them or is managing those sites. If it's a control room or a monitoring station, they would have some mechanism they've employed to manage those sites. But similarly, those sites still do need to be released from that company for anyone else to manage it. Okay, so there is a process in place to manage those kind of scenarios. All right, so let's look at what's happening at the end user point of view with regards to the cloud, because end users will be required to go through account detail verification. Without exception, they will have to put in all of their information. And the reason why this is because for the cloud to comply with the new GDPR rules in terms of privacy and so on, this has been a requirement for the public cloud. Users will have to put in their account information, their details, say their address, their phone number, and that's a requirement. They will have to change their username to an email. So if the customer is using a generic login, like JoeBlogs1 as their login, they will have to change that to an email address. If they already have a username that's an email address, then it will just have to be verified. So they will basically be emailed a verification email from the cloud, and once they've clicked on it, they will log in again and the verification has been done. Each user will also have to provide his full name, phone number, and full address that are not verified, and his country that is selected from a list, but is not verified. Okay, so it's really only the email address that's verified. End users will be able to merge all of their sites and panels to the same account. Okay, so if you've got a customer that's got multiple sites and they're currently using different login names or generic login names, when they go to log in to that site, if it's a generic login name, they can once they've verified the email for themselves, they can then pre-assign or reassign that login with an email address. And if they want the same email address to be that login for that site, then they will be asked to verify that email for that site. Okay, so all right, I've got I'll just hold off on the questions for the moment. I'll just keep moving forward through this because we are running out of time. So when they log in for the first time, on the new RISCO app, they will be requested to verify their account. All right, so this is pretty much what it will look like in the app. So the end user will have a number of days to verify their account. So once they click on verify details, they'll have to go through the verification process. And look, they will be forced to do this. They do have a grace period. If they haven't done it by the end of the grace period, they won't be able to log in. So it's important that they do this. Typically will have 60 days to complete the verification from the release date of the app. So once they update the app, they'll have 60 days to complete the verification. Okay, or if they're in a hurry, they don't have to do it the first day. They can click on do this later and just log in as normal. But at some point in time, they will be required to change their login details to an email address. Okay. And at the end of the 60 days, it's time, do it now. Otherwise, they won't be able to log in. Okay, so once they've done the verification, they will be told that they can click on the link in the email. And if they didn't get an email address, they simply click on the link there, didn't receive an email, and they can go through the email process again. Maybe they've put in a typo, maybe they've made a mistake in putting in a new email address, but they can repeat the process by clicking on didn't receive an email link. All right, so once they get the email, the verification is valid for only 7 days, so they do make sure that they do actually verify the email by clicking on the link. Once they've done that, they'll see in the app that the email verification is successful, and then they can continue on using the app. Okay, look, customers shouldn't have any issues with this. I mean, they do get the app for free. So it's a simple matter of updating the information and making sure that all their information is up to date in the cloud. Okay, so once they've put in all of they're actually required to put in all of this information. Now, once they've done that, the verification is fully successful. And then from a web user interface point of view, so if you've got customers that are using the web interface, when they log in for the first time, they will need to go through the verification process as well. For the self-registration process, like I mentioned before, it is still available. So if your installers are using self-registration, it can still be done. However, there is a little bit more information that you need to fill in now. As you can see here, you have the option to put in a site name. You're actually required to put in all this information, otherwise the registration will not succeed. You have the choice of registering either a control panel or a camera or a gateway. So you put in the serial number of the panel or the MAC address for the camera. Does need to be connected at the time. So what this is saying that the customers or end users cannot register a site, if they don't have a panel connected. Okay, so you do need to have a panel connected to use the self-registration method. Okay. You also need to make sure that you update the time zone here at this page as well. Okay, so once that person's been given the invite to become an owner, they click on the link to accept the invitation, and then they log in to that specific site, and then they're asked to put in the password. Okay, if the password matches with the registration, they'll notice that the sites are available for them to, multiple sites, if they have them, can be available at the login page, and they just put in the PIN number of that site to proceed to that specific panel. Okay, so if the site has been disabled for whatever reason, so if you're in the installer admin, your company's decided to disable the cloud features because the customers failed to pay their bill, when they go to log in, they'll see that their other site's been disabled, and of course they'll be calling you to find out why they haven't able to log into that site, and then of course they'll be required to pay their bill. Okay. All right, the cloud overview, from the user's standpoint, the web user interface hasn't changed a great deal, so that looks very similar. I do suggest that you log into the beta site as an end user, just to go over some of the small changes that have occurred. Now, but we just want to cover some of the changes that will happen with regards to the app. The existing iRisco apps will continue to support the RISCO Cloud 5 sites, but the new iRisco app will offer additional features. Users connected to the private RISCO Cloud will need to use a new free control app. Okay, so any of you using Permacom, you will need to be the customer will be requested to upgrade to a different app, and we'll cover that process in a second. All right, so in terms of the public RISCO Cloud, from moving from version iRisco app version 4.9, they will be requested, the app will automatically update to version 5, basically. And so when they log in, and I don't believe the app will be updated the same day as the new cloud. It will actually be possibly a week later. I haven't locked down a specific date yet, but I will try and get an update on that. The free control app that is currently used for those branded companies will also be updated to the new free control app automatically. Okay, and similarly will work without having any changes. Now, the in terms of the private cloud, if your customers are using the iRisco app on the private cloud, they will be requested to actually downgrade their app to a new free control version 4 app. Okay, so what will happen is when the iRisco or the free control app's updated, the app will detect that it's got a custom URL, and then with that, it will actually request the customer to downgrade the app to free control version 4, and that's when that it will work with it will basically stay with the older version of the app, if that makes sense. All right, so if any of your customers are using the free control or iRisco on the private cloud, when the app updates, the new app will detect that it's got a custom URL and will invite the user to downgrade to free control version 4. So if this is important for those of you who've got customers using RISCO or free control, if they ignore the request to downgrade to free control version 4, you may need to assist them to do that. Okay, to use free control version 4 for the private clouds. All right. The MyELAS, that's not so relevant here in Australia unless you are using any of the EL products. Again, that will be upgraded to the new RISCO Cloud version 5, the RISCO app, RISCO app version 5. For private, again, there's actually no change with the app at all. All right, these are the links to the beta sites. So I do suggest that you have a bit of a play, log into the Beta 5 Cloud. We have migrated, we've been migrating data across to the Beta Cloud on a regular basis, once a week. So if you haven't done so before, go to beta5.riscocloud.com IC, and that will allow you to log in using your current installer admin login. Right? It will ask you to verify your details, and you'll go through all that process like I mentioned before. But it will allow you to go through and have a bit of a play with the sites list and your company details and your company page and so on. You'll be able to see all your sites there. They won't be online, but it will allow you to have a bit of a play with the new beta, with the new cloud before it actually goes live. So when it goes live, it will revert back to riscocloud.com IC. So that'll be the new link. So it'll be riscocloud.com IC. IC standing for installer cloud, of course. The web user interface. This is the link for the Beta 5 version of the web user interface. If you wanted to, you could register a panel to the Beta 5 cloud. You just need to make sure you update the panel, the cloud IP address in the panel to beta5.riscocloud.com. Once you've registered the panel to beta5.riscocloud.com, it'll connect and you'll be able to see the panel live on the Beta 5 cloud. All right. But of course, please remember, when it goes live on the 2nd of October, it will be riscocloud.com. Okay, so you then, of course, after that date, you just continue to log into the RISCO Cloud proper. Okay, so I do have a couple of other questions here. If you've got any other questions, please type your questions in. I've got one here. Can an owner request to release from a company? The end user is always referred back to the installer to resolve any of these issues. The RISCO Cloud will not deal with end users. Okay, so they are always referred back to their installer. So that's not something that we do. If we've been requested by an installer to delete one of their own panels that they've installed themselves, yep, sure, no problem. But if an installer requests us to delete or deregister an end user's panel that's on somebody else's installer group, we will not do it. We always refer them back to the original installer. Okay, so I've got one other question. Will customers that have unique usernames that are not email addresses be affected? Well, the person that asked this question is actually not here anymore, but if you've got if he was still here and he heard the okay, so just to answer that question again, if they've got a generic username, they will need to be they will need to update that username to an email address before the app will allow them to log in. So that's part of the verification process with the new RISCO Cloud version 5. So there's no ifs or buts about that. They will have to do that for them to log in. So they do have a 60-day grace period, but after that 60 days is finished, they will need to update their login with an email. So if a new owner, I've got another question. So if a new owner of the house does not know the installer, what can he do? Look, if it's a new owner of a premises, then and the installer, we would have a record of who the installer was. If the installer hasn't actually registered that panel to his group, then the new installer has free reign. He can add that panel to his group without any issues. But if it's still belonging to a previous installer, then we would request that we would actually inform the new installer of who they need to go to have that panel released. And then of course, if it's a new owner of the house, then I'm sure the old installer wouldn't have any issues with releasing the panel. Okay, so really it's just a matter of politely dealing with one another in a way that's civil and without issues. Any other questions? Okay, so we've just covered what's involved with some of the changes. If there's anything else I can think of with regards to, look, there's some really important information to be mindful of, particularly with adding sites, creating sites, managing sites, also with regards to managing customers, especially when the new cloud goes live. Please be mindful. You will be getting some phone calls. Customers are not quite sure about what's happened when they come to the new app, and they'll be asking, oh, do I have to verify my information? The answer is yes, they will have to verify the information. And the answer for that will be because it's a requirement for the new GDPR. And there's no way around it. If they don't want to continue using the RISCO cloud, they have that choice. They can register their panel to a private cloud if they wish. But of course, with something like that, they'll be paying for it. Look, I hope the information that I've given you today has been helpful. Now, someone else has raised a question about multiple panels per site. The panels per site, you can only have one panel per site. If you remember the site details, when you clicked on that site, you can only add one panel. But that doesn't mean you can't have multiple sites per address. So you might have a campus and it's at the same address. That's fine. You can have multiple sites at the same address. That's not a problem. But you cannot have multiple panels on the one site. Okay, so that's just not possible. All right, so I hope that answers your question there. The site details are flexible enough for you to be able to put in the same address, okay, for different site names. So you might have building 1, building 2, but with all the same address, for example. And then you'd have a panel for each of those buildings. If it's in the same building, then of course your site name might be different. It could be level 1, level 2 for that building. So I hope that answers your question there. All right, so Will there be a PDF on the new cloud from the installer side? There will be a manual, like a quick user manual released. I'm not sure as to the exact date, but please keep an eye out on the Handy app and also the RISCO group website. If you haven't registered for the Handy app, or if you haven't registered for the RISCO group website, please do so. You will be able to obtain the new cloud version 5 manual, user manual, and installer manual from our website. Look, thank you everyone. I hope that everyone's enjoyed the presentation, and I hope I've answered all of your questions. Please, if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. If you've got any ideas, look, I've got one other question here. Do you need any firmware upgrade on the panels for the new cloud? No, you don't. So I'll just answer that question. Yes, look, if you've got any ideas for future webinars, if there's any other information that you want a webinar to be hosted about, please feel free to send your ideas and your thoughts to me by email, and we can certainly have a look at it. But look, good luck for the 2nd of October. I hope everything goes well. Look, your distributors have been updated with regards to this information as well, so they will be able to assist you further for those installers you're dealing directly with distribution. And look, good luck and enjoy. Thank you.